What is going on, YouTube? Northeast Ohio Sports Cards here to talk some NBA. Wanted to make a little video just kind of talking about 10 different players who have the potential, I think, to see prices spike back up again between now and the NBA playoffs. So these are all going to be guys. These are all stars, guys on playoff contending teams for the most part. There's one kind of fringe guy, but not really. But all big time, prime time players. Some are going to be pretty pricey. Some aren't. Just depends on the guy. But I think that they really do have a good shot to increase between now and mid-April and into May. But I think worst case scenario, you could ride the little wave until the start of the playoffs. And then either if you want to carry it into the playoffs, that's fine. I would probably start looking to move anything that you want to move, whether it's these guys or not, just period, just general thought. I would start looking to move stuff right as the playoffs start. Because remember, a lot of people are trying to execute the same plan you are. Oh, yeah, I'm going to hold this and I'm going to sell in the playoffs. Well, that means a lot of inventory hits the market. And if there's not enough buyers, that means prices come down. So I think you're better off to try to move stuff slightly earlier than the rest. It could cost you money in some cases, but in most cases, you'll probably end up coming out better for it. I personally think that's the approach I take, but to each their own. So we're going to run through 10 guys, and I'm not saying like run out and buy all these 10. These are just 10 interesting ones to me that if I could find something for the right price, at least intrigue me. Either the market's kind of slept on them, or I just don't think their cards are priced where they should be based off of current situations. Some are going to be more risky than others, and we'll talk about it. So let's get into it. First up, AD. I just went with his Prism, PSA 10, PSA 9, pick your poison. And I ran all the charts back in Market Movers back 30 days. If you're interested in Market Movers, links are down below, along with a discount code to try it out. And also, while you're down there, don't forget the YouTube stuff. Smash like, comment, sub if you're not. Hit the subscribe button. We're on the quest to 10K. I know we got a while to get there, but I have a goal set for myself to get 10K by a certain date. And we'll see if we could do it. So smash the subscribe button. Come along for the nonsensical ride here of cards, comics, shenanigans, and whatnot. But all right, back to the list. First up, AD. This one's a little risky because the Achilles injury is always kind of a worry. It's not like he tore it, but the strain, he came back, got hurt again, he left again. But if he comes back and is healthy and they make another deep run, then I think AD is kind of undervalued. Just over 20, just right at $2,400 for his PSA 10 or his PSA 9 for 650. These are low pop cards. You know, some of the stuff that we're going to talk about is not, but for the most part, we're looking at lower population count stuff. Just because this Prism's older, you know, only 1,300 PSA 10s, only 775, give or take, PSA 9s. But like I said, this one is risky because of the little recent injury history this year. And I think they're really going to kid gloves him, but assuming he's back, they should at minimum make the Western Conference Finals. He's one that if he's looking healthy, I wouldn't mind riding for a round or two in the playoffs and kind of see what happens. I've always really liked AD. I just think he's a freak of nature. So he's number one, and these are in no particular order at all. Second on the list, the Joker. Yeah. Last 30 days, he's actually down a little bit. His PSA 10 price has dipped 10%. And that's because Denver's kind of struggled a little bit. You know, they're like 6th or 7th in the West right now, I think, seeding wise. But a lot of those teams are jumbled up. So they could very easily, you know, move one way or the other. And a lot of the NBA talking heads, you know, Simmons, Windy, etc., Zach Lowe have been saying that the Nuggets are looking to make a move for something or someone. How big of a player that is, don't know. Just could be role player, whatever. But there was a run there where Joker was looking like a front runner for the MVP spot. And he's just a beast. And the other thing that's nice about his cards are there's not that many of them. His PSA 10, there's only 529 of them. That's it. That's nothing. For this card only be $1,300 and to be actually coming down is a little surprising. If the Jazz make a trade for really just about anyone that has a pulse, I think this sees a little spike. And we all saw what happened last year in the playoffs with him and Murray just eviscerating everybody. That could easily happen again. And as we just talked about, AD's banged up. So let's paint the picture. AD's a little banged up. The Clippers are going to clipper. And, you got the Suns and the Jazz, but they're not proven. Whereas, the Nuggets made a nice run last year. So I really like Joker for his current price point and the levels that his cards are on the pop report. Very, very interesting to me all the way around. Population count, check. Good team that's kind of gotten slept on the last couple of weeks, checked. Poised to make a move, check. And also a little bit of a dip, 12% dip on a 1,500 card is not nothing. So you're kind of buying into the dip a little bit there. You're not paying peak prices. Next up for bets is running mate. And this one's an interesting one because I talked about him before, Michael Porter Jr., Mpj, for those of us in the know. This is a guy that I wouldn't mind holding on to into next year. There's a chance he gets traded. I don't think he's going to this season. I think that's more of an off-season deal. I don't think Beal's on the table, and I think Beal's the only thing that he would get moved for. But him getting his own team is intriguing to me, regardless if he just stays on the Nuggets. He's beginning to recarve out his role. He has had a rough stretch. Rough stretch to start the season. COVID protocols, he came back, had to go in COVID protocols again, in and out of the starting lineup, whole 9 yards, a lot of it COVID related. But he's kind of worked through all that now, and I still really like him as a player. I think he's insanely good, and I think his stuff is still undervalued. He got a little run up, and then he pulled back again. And once again, over the last 30 days, his Prism base is back down to 179. That's this purple line here. And you can see, it was way up here at 270. He dipped down. He was in COVID protocols. He came back. It spiked back up again. Kind of went along its merry way, spiked way up, and then kind of came back down again. So you're buying the dip again. It was up to 250. It's down to 180 now. And prior to this, it was at 270 not that long ago. So you're not paying either one of the two peak prices. You missed the very low point here a couple weeks ago. I think we actually talked about him in a video right around here. But he looked solid right closing the All-Star breakout. And, rinse and repeat the previous conversation we just had about the Nuggets. If they get their act together, I think they're poised to make a little run potentially if things fall the right way. Either way, I think he's going to be a key piece in the stretch run. And I think his prices could see a rise now that he's back getting consistent playing time again. And across the board here, his stuff's pretty low pop count. It's not like Luka, Trae Young levels from the 18 class. His PSA 10 is only 3,000, but I also have on here his Optic, which is only 300, and his Select Concourse is only 100. And you could see, and this is an interesting one. I noticed this, and we worked through this chart. We'll see more examples of this. I think his Select Concourse is probably the most undervalued on this list. And his Prism, actually. In a lot of cases, I have noticed lately that Select has pulled out Concourse compared to Optic Base, has pulled away by a decent margin. You're going to see that on a lot of players that we're going to look at as we move through this list. This one hasn't, which leads me to believe that it's just lagging behind a little bit. Part of it could be just because it's a low pop count card. They don't sell very often, but the last sell date here was 3.6 for 140. And the last Optic date was 3.5 at 138. So those are fairly recent. If you can find this for around this price range, I think that's pretty good. Once again, I think there's room to grow here just because of the Select looks like it's getting slept on here. We'll look at that and a couple other examples moving forward. Next up, I talked about this guy a bunch on the channel. Sixers look like a beast. I'm not going to talk about Embiid today. We've talked about him before. His prices are still pretty high. But Ben Simmons, I know he's kind of a weird player. He doesn't have, a huge offensive game, but he's probably the best defensive player in the league, and he's an integral part to that Sixers team. And they look like a favorite for the Eastern Conference Finals with the Nets. If you had to force me to pick two teams now, I think it's the Sixers and the Nets. So he's probably going to get a decent long run on the playoffs, and his stuff has gone up. So we are not getting a discount here. His last 30 days, his prism base is up 28%, his optic base is up 54%, and his select base is up 42% as well. Now, once again, the interesting thing that we see here is select and optic staying pretty close together, but the select has half the pop count, 785 compared to 1430 on the optic. And actually, the optic has a higher pop count than the prism. You rarely see that, but the further you go back in prism, the more rare that it becomes. So I really don't think you can go wrong with any one of the three here. I think the most value is probably tied up in this select at 785, and also the fact that select's just been getting a lot of heat lately. I would probably go for that over the optic, but I don't think you could really go wrong with either one. Like I said, this one's a little, I don't want to say sketchy, but we're just not getting as much value as we are on some of the other ones because his stuff has been on the rise the last month or so. But I think it has room to keep going because I don't think the Sixers are going anywhere anytime soon. They're going to continue to be front of mind for a while. Next, and I actually think this is probably my favorite one on the list, Devin Booker. His stuff the last 30 days has basically been flat. His PSA 10 Prism is basically up 6%, which is really not that much. The 9 has gone up a little bit. It looked like it played catch up a little bit to the 10. But in general, the 10 for under 1,000 and the 9 for around 350 appear or are very appealing to me, rather. The Suns are legit. They are legit good. And with CP3 on that team now, I really think they're going to mess some things up in the Western Conference. And once again, I feel like the Western Conference is messier this year than it is in years past. To me, the East is easy. It's the Nets, it's the Sixers, and probably the Bucks. Like, those are your three. The West, the Jazz have the best record, but they're the Jazz. They're unproven. Lakers have the AD injury concern. As we said before, Clippers are going to Clipper. The Nuggets are hanging around, as we've talked about before. And then it's the Suns that are right up there. And, you know, they had that little run in the bubble last year. They kind of got that taste. They didn't quite make it, but they got the tease, and that was without CP3. And that team's really deep. They have a lot of good role players. You got Crowder, you got Johnson, you got Saric. You know, Ayton's been playing. He's not putting up big numbers, and his card prices aren't going crazy, but Ayton's playing really well defensively. And if they make any sort of run in the playoffs at all, or they look like a 2 seed or something, there's no way Booker's prices stay at $1,000. I just can't imagine that. You know, his pop count is only 1,300. That's not that much. So it doesn't take a lot of movement to shift that market. It's not like a Zion where there's 15,000 of them, or a Luka that there's 15,000 of them. All it takes is a small run, and then Booker's prices shoot up again. And this was a pretty expensive card last year during the NBA playoffs. Now, different market, so, you know, things were a little weird back then, but I think this is my favorite one on the list, and I am going to look to see if I can track down some Booker stuff, whether it's this or some of his other stuff. But for him, I think I want to stick with Prism mostly. He does have some select stuff out there, and I think he has some, or doesn't have optic, no. He does have some select stuff out there that's possible, but when you go further back, I don't try to get as cute chasing the select and optic low pop counts because the Prism pop counts are so low. Drink every time I say pop counts. Speaking of the Jazz, Mitchell, we talked about him recently as well on the channel. His stuff really spiked up, but as we're seeing here, he has gone through a slight pullback. Last 30 days, down 10%, down 13%, and down 3% on his Prism, his optic, and his select, respectively. And this is a case. So his select concourse is going for 415. His optic is only going for 256. So one of two things is true here. Either the select's overvalued or the optic is undervalued, because this is a pretty wide gap between those two. Much lower pop count. So I think this is semi-justified, but you don't usually see this big of a gap between optic and select concourse. But we are going to see it some more going forward. Once again, I think this might be a new trend where select concourse has kind of blown past optic, which was not always the case. They've kind of been neck and neck, but we're really starting to see some separation there. But I really don't think you could go wrong with any one of the three. So there's kind of like a nice spread here, depending on your budget. And once again, the West is literally the Wild West. there's a legit possibility the Jazz are in the Western Conference Finals. And if that's the case, Mitchell's stuff's probably going to skyrocket. He's still, even at the increased prices from his previous run-up, he's still probably the most undervalued star in the league because he's on the Jazz. He finally got a little bit of love. His price popped, and we can see it's already starting to pull back again. I would be very happy to buy this dip. This is probably my second most intriguing one on this list behind Booker. I am the most interested between Booker and Mitchell. Next on the list to keep this party going, so we don't make this video 3 hours long, and we're going to get into some names that we've talked about a bunch. Luka. I'm going to keep saying Luka until I'm blue in the face. Until I'm Mavs blue in the face, I'm going to keep spewing out Luka. It's Luka, guys. Like, I don't even care if his stuff dips when he gets eliminated from the playoffs or whatever. I'm perfectly fine sitting on Luka. They are either going to make a trade, probably maybe like a Victor Oladipo or something that they could get on the cheap because he doesn't have a ton of trade value right now. I just can't imagine them not doing nothing. If they do nothing, they have a ton of money in free agency. They're going to sign someone. I don't know if that player is going to be good, but it's going to spike the Luka market if they bring in anyone with a name. I'm just saying, and I legit have no NBA inside sources. This is just me in my basement talking. I'm just saying, Kawhi's a free agent. Leonard's a free agent. He hasn't signed. He could be a free agent, rather. I'm pretty sure he can get out of his deal this year if he wants to. Could you imagine? Just close your eyes. Woj bomb. You get the tweet notification. It's early July. You look at your phone. Leonard to the Mavericks on a 3-year with a player option. What do Luka's prices do? To the moon. I don't know if that's going to happen. I'm just saying. And don't invest on, don't invest in Luka based off of random guy in his basement speculating on Leonard free agency destinations with literally nothing to back that up. But you get the point. The Mavericks, Mark Cuban is not going to just rest on his laurels when it comes to surrounding Luka with talent. And they have the space this coming summer to make a move. So we'll see what happens with that. But I'm gonna keep pounding the desk to buy Luka. His stuff in general, and this is where we start getting into the select stuff. So you start seeing some interesting trends when you work through a bunch of these different players like this. His Prism's down 10%, his Optics down 2%, and his Prism's really been fluctuating week to week. It's 1,300 one week, then it goes to 1,400, then it goes back to 1,300, then it goes back to 1,400. So just call it 1,350 and be done with it. His Optics been between 600, 650, and 700. It bounces around as the Prism goes. The interesting ones are the Select. His Select Concourse is up 13%. His Select Premier is up 70%. His Select Premier has shot up the last 30 days. Finally, people are realizing that Select Premier are worth going after. At the beginning of this 30-day chart, his Concourse was 900. His Premier was 1,100. The Premier has almost 2/3 less cards on the population report. And they were only a couple $100 apart. Finally, people are starting to realize this. So I think one thing you could probably do right now is just comb through market movers and look for Select Premiers that are selling for close to Concourse and just make a play on the Premier. As long as the player's, semi-decent. Just make a move on the Premier. Because if the player does anything, the Premier is going to go off. So if you don't want to chase the Prism, I get it. 16K pop count on that Prism card is quite large. And I really think that is starting to matter when it comes to the Luka market. His Prism is always going to be liquid and, you'll always be able to move one. But I think the Optic and Select and some of his other stuff are starting to get a lot more love lately. So I think that's why you're seeing price increases there, why the Prism stays flat. So I think people are starting to spend money on Luka. It's just not going to the Prism like it used to. Next on the list, Ja. My boy. I'm going to keep pounding the desk on him too. And this is one where I think you can make a move on the select stuff if you want to. So he's down across the board, 16% on Prism, 16% on Optic, 20% on Concourse, 16% on Premier. That Premier for around $300 looks pretty tasty. Pop 519 compared to the 1800 on the Concourse, compared to the 4000 on the Optic, compared to the 14,000 on the Prism. I think the Grizzlies and Ja specifically are about to go on a heater, at least Ja specifically. And they're probably a dark horse candidate for a move too. They got a lot of moving parts there. Winslow's back, still no word on JJJ. Like I threw enough J's in there. Jaren Jackson Jr. They pitched that at the beginning of the season and he'd be back in January. Well, now we're in mid-March. And he's still nowhere to be seen. He's not. They already listed him on the injury report as being out for tonight or tomorrow, whenever their first game back is. But Ja came out of the gates on fire, hurt his ankle, came back, went in the COVID protocols because the whole team did, and has never really been able to get going. He had two really nice games right before the All-Star break. So I'm wondering if the ankle is finally back to 100% and he's like finally back to normal. They're an intriguing team to me. If they can sneak their way into the bottom of a playoff seed, if Ja gets into the playoffs, look out. I'm not saying they're going to make a deep run, but I think he sees a major surge in prices potentially. And just in general, I've kind of talked about this before, and maybe I'll do a separate video on this, but I've said this about 3 or 4 different times in other videos. I think the modern NBA market picks up very quickly here. You're going to have a couple things that I think kick it off. The NBA trade deadline and Prism coming out. And those two things are going to be very close to each other. The NBA trade deadline is going to be first, and then Prism comes out shortly thereafter. There's still no firm date on that. And then once Prism drops, we're only a couple weeks away from the playoffs. So we are going to be off to the races very quickly. There's not a lot of time left to get in on these guys. So make your moves. All right, 2 more. We'll make them quick. Zion. He's up 18% on Prism, 35% on Optic, 28% on Concourse, and 34% on Premier. Once again, I'm not big on like carrying Zion years and years and years and years, but there's absolutely money to be made on Zion, especially in the short term. He's playing out of his mind. The Pelicans are probably going to make the playoffs or at least be in strong contention for it down the road. Like I said, that bottom of the West is crazy. Everyone's kind of stacked together. Zion's playing great. He's getting all the media love, and they're on national TV a billion times the second half of the season. Once again, looking at prices, the Premier to me is very tasty at sub $600 with a pop count in the 450s. Compared to his Concourse at 1,700, his Optic at 5,000, and his Prism at almost 16,000 now. My Lord, that is a big number. But I don't see this train stopping. Once again, we're not getting in. The train's already left the station. I've been talking about this for 2 or 3 weeks now. If you want Zion, get in on it because he's going up. But I think there's still time. I think this stuff could easily go up another 30% between now and the end of the season, if not more. Heaven forbid they make a trade. They're rumored in a lot of different things too. I don't know what they'll do. Griffin is a wizard. Who knows what he'll pull out of his hat. And then one last one for the list. I know, the boringest guy in the NBA. Everyone gets on me when I talk about him. Giannis. Guy's playing out of his mind, guys. Just playing out of his mind. The numbers that he's putting up, look at his game log like the week before the All-Star break. It's insane. I know he has to prove himself in the playoffs and all that. But if he does, if they make the Eastern Conference Finals, if they make the NBA Finals, which is in play, it's absolutely in play. I think the Nets are going to be a tough out. I think the Sixers are going to be a tough out. But they're right there. I don't know if they can swing a deal, maybe something to strengthen the bench, but his hoops for 800, his select for 1600, and his Prism for 3500 and a PSA 10s across the board. that select for 1600, given the run that select has been on lately, seems very appealing to me of these three. I still really like the hoops. I love the picture on the hoops. I know it's paper. Actually has a higher population count than the select does. But the select at around 1100, pop count 1100, 1600 for the card, or 2 PSA 10 hoops. I don't know. I guess I'm just going to die beating this drum too. You know, I was a little hesitant on him for a while, but the numbers that he's putting up is just absolutely crazy. I could have included some other guys on this list. I did not include any Nets. KD, Harden, and Kyrie stuff is already like to the moon. So I don't know that I want to buy high on those guys other than KD. But KD is really getting pumped lately. Justifiably so. Dude's fantastic. And if they make the NBA finals and wins, you know, his prices could go to the next level. But I tried to find guys that haven't gone all the way up yet. There's some on here. But I think all these guys have tremendous potential for the second half of the NBA season. So that's all I got for you guys. Don't forget the YouTube nonsense. Like, comment, sub. You guys know the drill. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace.